very fast out of town. Does he help them win? You're under 500. Aaron Judge helps the Yankees win. You're paying the player $300 million. You better be sure that that guy's going to help you get over the hump. For some reason, this guy is completely lost on calling plays. Maybe he's a therapist. Jackson cried to the referee. No, he didn't. Hello for a new show of the Sports Loudmouth. I'm your host, Daryl Marks, my co-host, the Speedster, Speedy, Petey, executive producer, our man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Aaron Fishman, and our Sports Minute, Tommy Scoops. 631-672-3108 is the number to call. Go to our website at www.worldwidesportsradio.com. Check out all our shows throughout the week, including the Loudmouth with me and Speedy Petey every single, yes, you've heard it, every single Tuesdays and Thursdays at 7 p.m. Shout out to Tommy over there on our feed. And Raymond, what's up, my friend? Raymond is back, and he is ready to listen. Anyways, we got a great show lined up for you guys at 8:15. We will be talking to 8-year MLB outfielder Kevin Mensch. He will be joining us. He's fantastic. He's been on our show before. Yeah, he played for the Rangers. He played for the Blue Jays, the Brewers, the Nationals. He's fantastic. You guys are going to really love him. At 9:30, we'll be talking for the first time on the Sports Loudmouth, 8-year NFL cornerback and current Toronto, let me say this, Argonauts, am I right? Mm-hmm. DB coach Ike Charlton. He will be joining us for the first time on the Sports Loudmouth. Yes, Tom, you're absolutely right. It sounded like the woman lives in the zoo, 100%. And it definitely smelled like the zoo, what I was wiping my face with. So why don't we get into it? ESPN's Rich Cimini reports that Haason Reddick and his agent had all the leverage in this contract negotiations with the New York Jets. Cimini mentioned that Joe Douglas told Haason Reddick to show up and we'll talk. Douglas has not spoken to Reddick since April 1st and hasn't talked to his agent, Tory Dandy, since the holdout began. Douglas also mentioned they will not give Reddick a trade request if he wants to be traded before the season. Cimini says that the Jets are more likely to restructure their salary cap to give Reddick more money this year rather than give him a long-term deal right away. If Reddick holds out into the regular season, he will lose about $800,000 per game. Jermaine Johnson will start as the defensive end, and Will McDonald and Michael Clemens will rotate to replace Reddick's spot. I don't know what's going on with the New York Jets and Haason Reddick. And if you're a New York Jet fan, you're not going to like this. And I'm going to spit this because I know Jet fans are probably sitting here blaming Joe Douglas for this. And I've said this many, many times. Joe Douglas sat down with the agent, Mr. Dandy, Joe Dandy, or whatever the hell he calls himself. I call him Joe Dandy, even though his name's Tory. And he sat down with Haason Reddick before he made this trade with the Philadelphia Eagles. And Haason Reddick and Tory Dandy told Joe Douglas that he will play out his contract. He will play out his final year of his contract with the New York Jets if they start to negotiate a deal into the season. Haason Reddick showed up for what? Just to introduce himself to some of the players that were training before OTAs even started, really before the draft. And then he disappears off the face of the earth, April 1st. Disappears. The draft was, what, April 27th, April 28th? He hasn't been at Jets camp since April 1st. He lied to the New York Jets. He lied to Joe Douglas. And you heard it best yesterday. Actually, I'm sorry, on Tuesday, Reed said that it's because of Dandy on why Haason Reddick and the New York Jets haven't come to a deal. Now, Obviously, Haason Reddick is in the driver's seat. There's no question that he has all the leverage because he already said that he will not show up unless he gets a new contract. But $800,000 per game is going to push him a lot faster to negotiate this deal, at least this year. And I'm going to tell you why. Haason Reddick this year is making about $16 million. If he misses 8 games, he is going to miss out on almost $6.5 to $7 million. That's almost half of the money he would be bringing in this year. There is no way in hell Haason Reddick is going to allow that to happen. So I believe that before the season starts, and that's about a week and a half away, there will be an agreement reached. I do believe that. I think it'll just be this year. I think the Jets will wiggle some of these contracts around so they can bring Haason Reddick in for about 20 to 22 million. That's where they want to agree with a contract with him. They don't want to give him more than 22 million. He wants between 25 and 28. The Jets already said that's too much. Unfortunately, right now, the depth at the linebacker position or even a defensive end position is not good for the Jets. Michael Clemens, who's on and off every single year. And he's been with the New York Jets for what now? It's 4 years. He's been with the Jets for a while. He is not a sack guy. I think in the last 3 years, he averaged about 3.5, 4 sacks a season. Jermaine Johnson is expected to be a sack guy. Last year, in his second year and his first full year as a linebacker, as a starting linebacker, I think, if I'm not mistaken, he had about 8 to 8.5 sacks. He put on 20 pounds of muscle this offseason. A lot of the press has said he's looked fantastic at practices and even when he has played in some of the preseason games. But he's still young and he's still wet behind the ears. And you're going to depend on a guy that's been what? A starter for the New York Jets for maybe a full year. You're going to depend on him to be your pass rusher, your number one pass rusher. If I were the New York Jets, I would try to rush this as fast as I possibly can. Because if you go into the season with Jermaine Johnson, Will McDonald, who's a second-year player, this will be probably his first year where he's probably going to start. He's not even going to start. He's probably going to be playing on third downs. And Michael Clemens, you have no depth at that position. Now, C.J. Mosley is still there. He is the leader of that defense. He's the leader of the front seven, but he is not a pass rusher. He's more of a run. He's really a run-stopping linebacker. That's what he is. He doesn't really blitz. He doesn't really do all those things. He usually averages. C.J. Mosley on a good year probably has about 5.5, 6 sacks. The Jets need Haason Reddick this year if they want to be an elite defense. They need it, and they need him. Now, what could the Jets do to open up this pot? And it's not a pot of gold because the Jets don't really have anything. They've invested a lot of money in bringing in some of these free agents. They brought in Morgan Mosley. Moses. Morgan Moses. They brought him in. They brought in Tyron Smith. I'm sorry, I'm messing up their names. He's brought in a lot of offensive line depth. That's what he has done. He's brought a lot of depth in. The weakness of the New York Jets last year was the injuries they had at the offensive line. Elijah Vera-Tucker went down very early. They moved Tippmann. Tippmann was supposed to play center last year. They winded up moving him to guard. He played sensational as a guard. And as the season progressively moved forward and more injuries happened, they moved him to the center position where they obviously drafted him in the second round to play. They had no depth at the guard position. They had no depth at the tackle position. They drafted Olu this offseason as the number 11th pick in the draft in the first round. They're not going to start him right away, which I think is good for him. He'll learn behind Smith and Mosley. Morgan Moses. I don't know why I'm messing their names up, but Morgan Moses, he'll be playing behind them, learning a little bit about the position as an NFL player. The guy gave up no sacks in 3 years in college football against all these top teams, the Big 12 and Pac-10 and all that other team in the SEC. He was dominant, but the NFL is different. It's faster. It's a different game. Joe Douglas knew he had to beef up that offensive line. He knew it. And then he had to decide if he was going to bring Bryce Huff back. A lot of Jet fans are complaining that they should have re-signed Bryce Huff. He only signed for $18 million a year. That would have been a steal because that's all they want to pay Haason Reddick, between $18 and $22 million. But they took a chance with Haason Reddick because Haason Reddick can change their defense in a higher position in this year's season. Last year, they were ranked in the top 6 an all defense. This year with Haason Reddick, for a full season, 17 games, you could be in the top 3, top 2, maybe even the number 1 defense in all of the NFL. There's a lot of pressure on the New York Jets. Joe Douglas's job is on the line. Robert Saleh's job is on the line. Aaron Rodgers could retire this offseason if this team doesn't really change its ways. Aaron already said he wants to play till 44, 45. Aaron's going into the season at 41 years old. At the end of the season, he'll be 42. He wants to play another 2 years, maybe even 3 more years. If this Jets team is built like everybody expects them to be built, a playoff contender, Douglas might have a 2-year stint with Garrett Wilson under his rookie contract and Sauce Gardner under his rookie contract. Elijah Vera Tucker will be a free agent after this year. So they're going to have to decide what they're going to do with him. If they're going to franchise him, if he has a good season, he stays healthy, you're going to have to decide on what you're going to do with Elijah Vera Tucker. And then Aaron Rodgers' contract. There's a lot of decisions that have to be made by the New York Jets. Haason Reddick was not the number 1. But now, going into the season, you need Haason Reddick more than Haason Reddick needs you. Because the one position you don't have a lot of depth in is defensive end. You don't have a lot of depth. And I don't want to hear it from the Jets. Well, we have Will McDonald and Jermaine Johnson. What happens if one of those guys go down? What happens if 2 of those guys go down? What are you going to do? You have no depth. Now, you could bring in these veteran players. There are a few veterans that are not signed yet. Yeah, they could do that. But why do that when you have a chance to sign Haason Reddick? Now, you have to figure out what works for you as an organization and what works for Haason Reddick. If I was Haason Reddick, I would just sign a 1-year extension with the New York Jets, try to get about 20 to 22 million from them. And then next offseason, either the Jets give you that extension or you ask the Jets to move you in the offseason. The Jets could get a pick back if they decide to let you go. They lost a 3rd-round draft pick. They gave up a 3rd-round draft pick to the Philadelphia Eagles for Haason Reddick. If Haason Reddick has over 13 or 14 sacks this year and plays, I think, if I'm not mistaken, plays 13 to 14 games, the Jets would have to give up a 2nd-round draft pick in 2025. That's a big pick, as the Jets have been really building their team around the draft. So you sit here and you wonder, what should the Jets do? What should Joe Douglas do? If Joe Douglas believes his job is on the line, which I believe it is, he has to find a way to make this contract work. He's going to have to find a way to make Haason Reddick agree to a 1-year deal where he can bring him in for the rest of this season and then tell Haason, listen, we'll come to a negotiation at the end of the season. If we can, we'll let you go, and we'll let you go wherever you want to go.
Yeah, you look at the potential for creativity with this kind of thing. Now, Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs did the same thing last year, and it really damaged the relationship with both of those teams. So we'll see what it is with Haason Reddick with the Jets. Now, I don't think Haason Reddick, like you were saying, is not as much of it as Saquon was to the Giants or Josh Jacobs was to the Raiders offense.
I don't think it has anything to do with Haason Reddick. I think it has everything to do with his agent, or Dandy.
And yeah, they're going to have to try to be creative to make a compromise work. But Haason Reddick is getting all the leverage in this spot because the Jets
have no depth.
They lack depth because those 2 guys are both very raw. Johnson's good. I trust him even to be a number 1 pass rusher. Will McDonald, we knew, was very raw out of the draft. He's undersized. He's not as good in run defense. And Michael Clemens, like you were saying, has become more of a run stopper, not really a developed pass rusher. And that kind of thing, Robert Saleh is going to have to figure out with trying to rotate these guys accordingly. Because remember, the Jets also, I know the money was pretty big, but the Jets also traded John Franklin Myers, who was another guy that was playing on the edge last year. They got rid of Carl Lawson, who, by the way, was cut by the Cowboys, Nathan, so it's not going to save your defense, but nevertheless.
Carl Lawson was not the same since he tore his Achilles.
Yeah.
As soon as his Achilles went, he has not been the same. When you lose, and a lot of people over the years, running backs, even quarterbacks, are never the same after they tear their Achilles, especially a pass rusher like Carl Lawson, where he hurt his driving foot on where he starts to, use and curve around the bend. That leg he tore his Achilles on that leg when he went around that bend. He's not the same player. And again, that's why the Jets decided to part ways with him. The Jets don't have any depth over there. And yes, Speedy, you're absolutely right. When you look at the position that the New York Jets are in, their leverage does go to Haason Reddick. Haason Reddick looks at the depth chart right now, and there is no depth over there. The Jets have a tremendous amount of depth now at the offensive line, which they didn't have last year.
And
they have
tackle, too.
Yes, they have a tremendous amount of depth at the running back position now. They have a tremendous amount of depth at the tight end position and wide receiving position. Everywhere besides the pass rush. And that is why they decided to make that move for Haason Reddick, because they didn't believe that Bryce Huff was an every down type of player. And that's why we'll see what happens with Bryce Huff this year with the Philadelphia Eagles. Who knows what he is going to be with the Eagles when he's playing every down. But we know what Haason Reddick is. Haason Reddick for the last 3 years has been one of the most dominant forces at the line of scrimmage. He has been probably amongst the league's best. You talk about Micah Parsons, you talk about TJ Watt, you talk about Myles Garrett. All these guys are averaging between 15 and 20. This guy's been averaging between 13 and 15. So he's amongst the top 6, top 7 pass rushers in the last 3 seasons. So obviously he knows he has the leverage, and he knows the Jets need him. So now the Jets are stuck here and wondering, how is Robert Saleh going to build up packages with this defense? By the way, the Jets do not like to blitz.
Nope.
As a matter of fact, the Jets are one of only 2 teams that blitzed very little last year.
Yeah, 4th lowest blitz rate last year.
I think it was the second. Wasn't it the second?
I think it was the second in the second half of the season, because it was them, the 49ers, the Eagles, and
they don't
the
blitz
Browns.
a lot.
Yeah.
They don't blitz a lot. And Robert Saleh does not like to bring up men, and he doesn't like to bring up the safeties. He likes to play coverage in the secondary. That's what he likes to do. And he likes to play one-on-one coverage, especially with DJ Reed there and Sauce Gardner and Michael Carter. The second is there. So he likes to play one-on-one coverage and use the safeties to come under these top-end wide receivers to make sure that they have enough coverage so there's not big plays given up in the middle of the field. Right. But right now, the Jets are in a bad position. And I'm not saying that Jermaine Johnson isn't going to take another step. He will. But what happens if he goes down?
Right.
What happens if he goes down? And they don't have another guy on the other side of the line. So what are teams going to do? They're going to double up on Jermaine Johnson. Jermaine Johnson is a young guy. As good as he was last year, putting on 20 pounds and looks really, really good at practices. And everybody's telling me that this guy is going to be a breakout type of player. He was a Pro Bowl player last year. And the Jets do have good linebackers. Quincy Williams is a fantastic linebacker, an all-pro linebacker. C.J. Mosley is a second-team all-pro linebacker. They have 2 really good inside linebackers. But on the outside, they don't have a lot of that. And again, Jermaine Johnson, he can play on the inside. He can play on the outside. Now they're moving him to defensive end, and he's an undersized defensive end, and teams know that. So what do you think the Jets are going to have to do? They're going to have to move him around like the Cowboys do to Micah Parsons.
They're going to have to be schematically creative, which is not something that Robert Saleh nor Jeff Ulbrich likes to do a lot when it comes to trying to deviate away from what they usually do. You mentioned it. They don't like to blitz a lot. They play a lot of zone, and they don't do a lot of corner blitzes. So you have many different options here with what the Jets are going to have to try with that. You mentioned Quincy Williams. Quincy Williams kind of broke out in the 2022 season, being a lot more of a pass rushing type linebacker.
But he's not really that.
Last year, he developed into a more well-rounded. Yeah.
He's a coverage linebacker. That's what he does. He's good at stopping the run. You can use him to get at the quarterback, but more in like these weird, like nickel blitz packages. That's what they like to do. They like to move them up on the line. They like to put 7 guys on the line, make it seem like they're going to use a blitz, step like 3 guys back, and the 4 guys rush the quarterback and put some pressure on different edges where they can, one of these guys can get on. And Quentin Williams, he's going to play a big part of this, because last year in the second half of the season, he was triple teamed at some point. And that's why they brought Haason Reddick in, because what Haason Reddick does is he draws double teams. And if he draws double teams, it takes a man off of Quentin Williams. And what does that do for Quentin? It gives him an opening to get at the quarterback. That was the reason why everybody thought that this Jets defense was going to be as good as any defense in football this year, because bringing in Haason Reddick takes the pressure off of Quentin Williams, which opens up the blitz or even the packages that Robert Saleh could use this year with the talent that he has in his front 7.
Right. I was just going to mention Quentin Williams too, because Quentin Williams also has very good quickness for an interior defensive lineman too. The other thing they could consider doing, because they did build up good defensive tackle depth, bringing in Kinlaw and a lot of the guys they had last year too, the young guys.
I like Kinlaw. I've heard a lot of good things about him at training camp.
Yep. So that allows, maybe if they want to put a more power, bigger guy on the outside, maybe they put Quentin Williams on the edge. If they want to keep Quincy Williams, like you said, in coverage, that's one option. They also could blitz more of the corners. Could they try that more often? Robert Saleh does not like to do that, or blitz more of the safeties, which they don't like to do that. But let's see if they're going to have to be creative and make it work, because the Jets also do play a lot of nickel. They have one of the highest percentage, top 10 of nickel defenses last year, which has hurt them in certain instances against the run and against tight ends. But if the Jets have to play more linebackers, the inside linebackers up more because of this issue with Haason Reddick, then they're going to have to try to have maybe Sherwood drop more in coverage, Williams on the edge, or guard the screen passes
Now,
more.
Clark is going to be back this year, so he is going to play a big part as far as the run stopping is concerned, because he's a great safety when it comes to run stopping. And last year they lost him. I think he tore his ACL.
Yeah, right.
He was out for the season. He is back. He's going to be a starting free safety for the New York Jets. So what do the Jets need to do is they're going to have to use these safeties to cover the middle of the field and stop the run. So these guys, these linebackers like Quincy Williams, or even guys like CJ Mosley, is going to have to move up and actually put a little bit more pressure on that offense, the offensive lines that they're going to be playing against. Now, the Jets have San Francisco in the first game of the season. Trent Williams is probably not going to play in that game. That benefits the New York Jets, because Trent Williams, without him on that offensive line, I think the San Francisco offensive line is subpar at best. They're not really good, okay? Trent Williams really solidifies that offensive line. Without him, they're probably a 15th or 16th offensive line right now in the NFL. At best. So the Jets are going to be able to do a lot more now that Trent Williams is not going to play in this game. And what we've been hearing is Trent Williams will not play in this game, especially giving Brandon Ayuk this contract. And we will get into that a little bit later. So, I mean, now the Jets are going to have an opportunity. Now, Aaron Rodgers does not play well in San Francisco. If you look at his record in his career, I don't remember what the number is, but I think he's won 2 games in San Francisco.
And one of them was against the Niners' third-string quarterback.
Yeah. So he's not good in San Francisco. So you have to look at numbers because of the way they play on those fields. And Aaron Rodgers, out of all the places that he's played over the years, San Francisco is not the place that he really likes to play at. Now, if the defense can get at the quarterback, put pressure on Brock Purdy like we've seen in the Super Bowl, like Kansas City did to him, especially in the second half, Brock Purdy is a shell of who he was throughout the season. Brock Purdy is a good regular season player, as we've seen, but in the playoffs, he's not as good. So this isn't the playoffs. This is the first game of the season. There's a lot of pressure on the New York Jets. So I think that the Jets coming out with a win in San Francisco would really put the Jets in a very good position going into week 2 against Tennessee. So the Jets are going to need Haason Reddick. That's why I think this weekend and this week, the Jets need to sit down with Dandy and Haason Reddick and figure out where they can meet in the middle, even if it's a 1-year deal, even if you have to figure out on how it works for him to get him up at 22, 23 million. You do that because you need Haason Reddick just as much as Haason Reddick needs you. And Haason Reddick will do whatever it takes to sit out for the Jets to either trade him or the Jets to either cut bait with him or make a move and give him the contract that he wants.
Right. And we saw it last year, too. Even Aaron Rodgers got restructured his deal at the very last minute to make sure that the Jets are able to finalize their salary cap situation. So why not? They can use the remainder of whatever cap space they have left to make that kind of thing work and kind of meet in the middle. Like the Jets had close to $7 million in cap space when we were talking about it a couple weeks ago. Like give him the rest of that money. You're not going to bring in anyone else. That's $21 million. That's good enough of a compromise at this point to try to make it work.
Maybe the Jets are thinking Devontae Adams.
Maybe.
Is that what they're thinking? I don't know what the Jets are thinking. I was telling Mikey C today, we had a very interesting conversation on the phone, and I said, maybe the Jets sit on Haason Reddick. If Devontae Adams and the Raiders are not getting along in the first 3 to 4 weeks, maybe the Jets could move Haason Reddick to the Raiders as a package deal. You're going to have to give up a lot more than that. You're going to have to give up probably a second and a third for a guy like Devontae Adams, and you can squeeze in Haason Reddick in that trade, and maybe you can get a Devontae Adams for him. I don't know. I don't know how that's going to work. And I also heard in the offseason that Cooper Kupp could be available sometime in the middle of the season with the LA Rams if Puka has another good season. So, because Puka is going to be expecting a contract soon too if he's going to put up big numbers. And if you've seen where Puka is right now in the fantasy draft world, he's in the top 10 right now. Could you believe that?
Yeah, he was drafted 10th in my family league. Yep.
Puka is a top 10 wide receiver over Cooper Kupp, who's been a top 10 player for the last, 6-7 years.
Yeah, Kupp's like a 4th-round fantasy value. I like him a lot more than that, but like he's thought of that way because of the year Puka had and the year Puka had last year.
And the injuries that he's had. Last year, I think before the season started, Cooper Kupp was a top 5 prospect.
Oh, yeah.
In the fantasy draft.
Oh, yeah.
Now this year, he's not that. He's a 4th-round talent, 5th-round talent. You could get Cooper Kupp probably in the 3rd or 4th round
and
get him at a good value. And I'm going to tell you this right now. I wouldn't be surprised if the LA Rams decide to move him at the trade deadline if they're missing a piece, missing an offensive lineman. Now, this year, obviously, they bulked up in the draft when it came to defense, but I do believe their weakness going into the season is their offensive line. Their offensive line's a lot better than it was over the last 2 or 3 years, but I think they're missing a right tackle. I think their left tackle is definitely better than a right tackle. So I think that there could be somebody like a Cooper Kupp to be available at the trade deadline. I could see the LA Rams moving him if he starts off the season a little bit slower because of Puka. So, I mean, going back to the New York Jets, the Jets still sitting at the position that they are with Haason Reddick. They're going to have to come to the table and figure out what works out for both him and the New York Jets. The Jets cannot go into the season. If they do go into the season against San Francisco, they cannot go into the second half of the season without an elite pass rusher.
No, they can't. And that's what makes the decision so tricky to be able to make this kind of thing work, because they have to make sure that Haason Reddick is going to be happy. They need time. He's going to need time to fit into that scheme, too.
It's going to take a while.
Because he's a versatile guy that it was mostly played in 3-4 defenses his whole career. Besides his 2 years with the Eagles, every other defense with the Cardinals and the Panthers that he's played in has been a hybrid or a 3-4 defense. So that's going to take him a little while to get going, too. So if the Jets can't get pressure, especially like you're saying, if they struggle to rush the passer against the 49ers without Trent Williams, that's a big red flag. Tennessee's offensive line's not very good either. So if they struggle there, that's a huge red flag. And same thing with the Patriots in week 3. If they have issues rushing the passer without Haason Reddick in any of those games, that's a big problem.
Just think about this. The New York Jets play 3 games in 10 days. 3 games in 10 days. They're already 3 games into the season after 10 days. Just think about that if you're a Jet fan. Your season could be over if you go 0-3. It could be over for the New York Jets, because you do not want to fall in the AFC 0-3. You don't want to fall 1-2 either. And you have Tennessee, which you're probably better than. I don't know how much better, but you're better than. You're better than the New England Patriots. A lot of teams are better than New England. And now that Jacoby Brissett is starting, they're not going to start Drake May. I could see what the Patriots are trying to do this year. They're trying to lose out.
And they're not going to get Brandon Ayuk anymore either.
No, because Brandon Ayuk just signed a big contract with 49ers. So, I mean, if you're a Jet fan right now, you do not want to go into the season in San Francisco, lose a very close game, or lose a game that you should win without Trent Williams, and then go into Tennessee and lose that game. You're going into your first game of the season at home 10 days into the season and could lose against the Patriots and go 0-3. I don't know when their bye week. I think their bye week is the 5th or 6th week. I mean, the Jets could go into their 4th game in 10 days 0-3. And you need Haason Reddick. You really, really do. So I think the Jets they don't have any leverage here.
No.
The Jets are going to have to figure out how this is going to work and how it works for Joe Douglas, because Joe Douglas knows he's on the hot seat. He made this move.
Yep.
He made this move. I don't believe it's Joe Douglas's fault, because Joe Douglas was told by Torrey Dandy, and he was told by Haason Reddick that he will play out his final year of his contract with the Jets, and then they would negotiate something before the season's end. He completely went back on his what he said to the New York Jets before the Jets made that trade. And then the Jets made the trade. He comes in on April 1st and then decides not to show up to mini camps and show up to OTAs or even show up to the preseason. Now you're 1 week away from the NFL season, and your best pass rusher has not stepped on a football field in about a month and a half.
Yep, and it's going to continue to lose value the more it sits out, too, because
actually probably longer than that, 2.5 months.
Yeah, because you mentioned like if he's still not playing by the bye week, like you're dealing with a very rusty Haason Reddick.
July, actually 3 months
in a new scheme altogether with the Jets. You mentioned like trade partners that could happen. Maybe the Raiders take it on, but the Raiders, that's not one of the things they need. They have a good defensive line. Like it doesn't make sense. Maybe you got a contending team that loses a pass rusher. Fine, maybe they're desperate, but still, like even so, like Haason Reddick, like he's not giving out lists of teams. He's going to lose the value that way, and he wants to go to another contender. There's a reason he went to the Jets when he's got frustrated with the Eagles.
Well, he went to the Jets because Aaron Rodgers is there. He knows he has a chance to win. The Jets in the AFC East right now are expected to win the division. Yeah. The Dolphins, even though they're a good offensive team, they're not the same defense they were last year. They lost a lot of pieces in the offseason. So, and they lost their defensive coordinator. So they're going to the season with a new defensive coordinator. I like Mike McDaniel. I think he's a fantastic coach. I think he's one of the more underrated coaches right now in the NFL. But I call him Screech because that's what he looks like from Saved by the Bell. I mean, he's not as tall, but he looks like Screech. Unfortunately, the New York Jets are going to be pressured this year and have to win, because if they don't win, there's going to be a lot of backlash. The Jet fans, they're sitting here thinking that if Aaron Rodgers stays healthy, we're going to win 13 and 14 games. I don't think we're winning 13 or 14 games, but if the Jets could win 2 out of the 3 games going into week 4, the Jets have a chance to win 11 or 12 games. I predicted the Jets are going to win 12 or 13 games, but that's a little high, because I looked at their schedule and I'm worried that the Jets have to just think about the NFL. Because of Aaron Rodgers, they built this where the Jets have to, they're the only team in the first 5 weeks that have to play 3 games in 10 days. Mm-hmm. Just think about that. They're the only team. And the Jets, who are not a good team, last year they only won 7 games. The year before, how many games did they win? 7 games.
And they were 6-3 and fell apart.
I mean, honestly, the Jets are in a position where everybody's expecting them to do wonders this year and have a wonderful season, because Aaron Rodgers, you're going into the season, you don't even know who your pass rusher is.
Yep. They want to make Aaron Rodgers happen, so they're going to cram everything all at once. It's a big toll on these other players, and it's a big toll if he does come back on Haason Reddick trying to learn new defense.
You know what's so funny? When you go on social media and you read what the Jet fans are saying right now, we don't need Haason Reddick, all this other stuff. It is ridiculous. I don't know what any of these Jet fans are thinking in their damn pea brains, but I'm going to tell you guys something. I'm going to tell all you Jet fans something. If Haason Reddick decides to sit out for the first 5 to 6 games, the Jets are not winning more than 3 games. I'm going to tell you that right now. If he sits out for 6 games, the Jets will either go 3-3 or they'll be 2-4. They need a pass rusher, because again, Quentin Williams last year was getting triple teamed. You're paying Quentin Williams a lot of money. He's making what? $28 million. He's one of the highest paid defensive tackles in all of the NFL, and he can't break free. His brother had a better season than he did. His brother's making what? The Jets signed him to a really good contract the year before. Actually, last year they signed him. I think he signed a 3-year deal worth about like 20-something million, yeah, $28 million.
Great deal.
It was a great deal because Quincy Williams turned into a superstar last year and was an all-pro player. But we'll see if Quincy Williams could do it again now that they have film on him. It's not the same. Just like C.J. Stroud. I told you, coaches are going to watch film. Film is there now. You can see what he's strong at and what he's weak at. And I'm going to say the same thing to the New York Jets. The Jets' weakness will be the tackle, the defensive end position. It will be the defensive end position, no matter how good Jermaine Johnson is this year at DE. NFL Network's Ian Rappaport reports that Jamar Chase wants to become the highest paid wide receiver in the NFL. Chase said he doesn't want significantly more than Justin Jefferson contract, but still wants to be paid more. Chase will be making just over $1 million at base salary this year and just over $21 million next year on his 5th-year option. Bengals head coach Zach Taylor said he spoke too soon, saying that Chase would be at practice all week. Chase showed up at practice on Sunday, but has held out for the rest of the week. Chase has had 268 catches for 3,717 yards, 29 touchdowns in 3 seasons with the Bengals. Jamar Chase is going to make a lot of money. He is going to make Justin Jefferson money. CeeDee Lamb actually took less money to stay with the Cowboys because he wants Dak Prescott's contract to be set in stone, and he also wants Micah Parsons to be signed as well. I think what he did was take a couple of $1 million less, so the Cowboys in the next year can decide on how they're going to divvy out the money to these other 2 guys. CeeDee Lamb, I think, is better than Jamar Chase. I do. I'm not saying Jamar Chase isn't a great player. He's a sensational player. He really is. He's a great wide receiver. But if anybody watched the beginning of the season last year, when Joe Burrow was healthy, Jamar Chase had a lot of problems. In coverage, teams started to double team him, started to put a safety under him, sometimes put 2 safeties under him, and he couldn't get hot early in the season. It took the second half of the season and the Bengals forcing the ball to him where he started to explode. I'm not saying Jamar Chase isn't explosive. And I'm not saying Jamar Chase isn't an elite wide receiver. But when I look at Justin Jefferson and CeeDee Lamb and Tyreek Hill, they're on a different scale. I look at Jamar Chase on another scale, that under that first-tier wide receiver. He's right under it. I think he's right under Davante Adams. I think Davante Adams is still an elite tier 1 wide receiver, but he's getting up there in age. How long is Devontae Adams going to be at that top tier? It could be this year where we're going to see things start to break down for him. Jamar Chase is a young guy. Likes to dance, likes to prance. He's from LSU. We know all those LSU guys love to, dance and prance around like they're superstars before they even step on an NFL field. Now, Jamar Chase deserves a lot of credit. He does. Because of what he has done. His first season, he went to the Super Bowl. But since then, and it's been what, now 3 years?
2 years.
Well, 3 years since the Super Bowl. Going into this year, it'll be 3 years. They have not made the Super Bowl. And the pressure is on Jamar Chase because Joe Burrow just got paid. Now, Jamar Chase will get his money. There's no question because Higgins is not going to be there next year. They're going to move from him. They're going to move on from him. They'll probably trade him. There's a good chance they might trade him at the trade deadline. Because if they wait until the offseason, they could franchise them and then move them. That's what they could do. But I don't know where the Bengals see their future at that second wide receiving position is going to be. They know Jamar Chase is the guy they're going to pay, but they got to scale that money around. And right now, Jamar Chase just saw 2 wide receivers this offseason get paid. CeeDee Lamb and Justin Jefferson. I believe the 2 wide receivers that are better than he is. Now, he wants to get paid Justin Jefferson money. He says, well, I don't want to get the most out of it. He wants to be paid the most yearly. That's what he's saying. He wants to be the highest paid yearly. He is not Justin Jefferson. He's not. Justin Jefferson is a different beast. And I'm going to tell you why he's a different beast. Now, I know a lot of people are probably going to attack me on TikTok and Twitter and whatever after they hear this take. If you look at Justin Jefferson last year when he came back with a 3rd or 4th tier quarterback, Justin Jefferson put still over 1,000 yards in what? 8, 9 games? He put 1,000 yards and he put up like 8 or 9 touchdowns. Jamar Chase, what was his numbers last year? Bring up his numbers. Jamar Chase played at least 15 games. At least 15 games. I'm willing to bet you Jamar Chase had 1,300 yards.
12, 16, 7 touchdowns, 100 catches.
And what was Justin Jefferson last year in the games that he played? How many games did Jamar Chase play?
He played 15, you're right.
15 games. Okay, I don't even have it in front of my face. I'm guessing here. Okay, and my numbers were pretty dead on. I'm going to say that Justin Jefferson, had close to 1,100 yards. He had almost 8 touchdowns, and he played 10 games.
Yep. Besides the touchdowns, 5. You're right. 1,074, right near 1,168 catches in 10 games.
They're not even close. Justin Jefferson played 10 games. He played 15 games. And Justin Jefferson, had 200 less yards than him? You're not going to pay Jamar Chase. Unless Jamar Chase has a Tyreek Hill year. And he could. Joe Burrow's healthy. He could have a Tyreek Hill year. If he gets 1,500 yards and he puts up, even CeeDee Lamb numbers, 11 or 12 touchdowns, and he's elite. He's amongst the top 5 in the league. But there are other guys that are going to have good years. Garrett Wilson will have a good year if there's a healthy Aaron Rodgers. So, again, they're going to compare his numbers this year to Justin Jefferson's numbers over the last couple. And CeeDee Lamb's, the year before where he put up those numbers why he got paid this year. I just don't know if Jamar Chase is on that quarter. I don't that tier. Okay? I don't know if he's there. I just don't know. I know he speaks highly of himself. I know he's very confident about himself. And I know he's going to make the excuse that he didn't have Joe Burrow last year. Justin Jefferson had a 4th-tier quarterback, a guy that they got from Arizona. From Arizona. They brought him in, and then he lost the job, and they gave a job to somebody else because he played like crap at the end of the season.
49ers legend Nick Mullins.
And he still put up 1,000 yards. And that game against the Lions, I think he had like 100 170 yards in that game.
Yeah, they were stopping everyone else. They let him, they just decoyed him, let him do his thing.
It doesn't matter. He put up 170 yards and 270 yards and 2 touchdowns in that game, or I think it was a touchdown. Yeah, I mean, he put up unbelievable numbers last year at the end of the season, and he didn't have to put up those numbers. What I'm trying to say here is, I understand Jamar Chase, and obviously it's the going rate. When you see Justin Jefferson make that money and CeeDee Lamb make that money, he's going to say, well, I'm just as good as them, so I want to get paid just as much or more. But I think if the Bengals are smart, they're going to have, if he doesn't put up 1,500 yards this year, they're going to have to figure out a number that makes sense for this team and this organization, because they're paying Joe Burrow. He's the highest paid quarterback. Him, Trevor Lawrence, and Jordan Love are the 3 highest paid quarterbacks in the NFL. If you're paying Joe Burrow $55 million and you're going to pay Jamar Chase $35 to $36 million, you're talking about more than a quarter of your salary going into 2 players. It doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't. That's what the Dolphins did with their 3 guys, Tua, Tyreek, and Waddle, all making big money, and they lost a lot on defense mistake because of that. And it could be a big mistake if these young kids don't pan out, this new coordinator on defense doesn't pan out. And the Bengals, they have a well-coached defense, so they were able to get leeway with losing some free agents and make it kind of thing work. Lou Anamoros is one of the better defensive coordinators in the league, very creative, but their offensive line still has a big question mark, and they lost Joe Mixon in the offseason. Like you said, T. Higgins, they have to figure out what they're going to be able to do with him. He's probably going to have to play on the franchise tag this year. And you're right, if they do struggle in the beginning of the season, who knows what will happen with him. Now, Jamar Chase, the reason the Bengals have a little more leeway with that is because he doesn't have to be paid right away. He's still on the 50-year option. So
he's going to do exactly what Haason Reddick is doing right now. He's going to do exactly what all these other wide receivers are doing. They're not going to play. CeeDee Lamb did not show up to camp. He did not show up over the last couple of weeks because he wasn't paid. He is going to force their hand. He's going to say, listen, you're either going to pay me or I'm not going to play. I'm not going to show up to practices, and I'm not going to be ready for a season. You're going to see CeeDee Lamb he's going to be dealing with some injuries early in the season because he's missed a ton of time on the football field, and you got to get your bodies ready for the season. Haason Reddick, I mean, look at Haason Reddick. He's missed 3.5 months of training. Even though if he's practicing and training it's just not the same thing on a football field against your peers and against guys that are just as talented as you are. You're playing against high schoolers. You're playing against college players, and you're training with them. It's a different ball game. It's a different type of beast. And Haason Reddick knows all about that because he wasn't the same player he was when he went to the Eagles. When he was on the Lions, he was okay. He wasn't great. He really transitioned into a great player when he left the Lions in Arizona and he went to the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, and I think what the Dolphins' blueprint was with Hill and Waddle, the Bengals have to use with Jamar Chase, because Jamar Chase can still play on the $21 million 50-year option and have the contract begin in 2026, and you just front load it with more guarantees or better signing bonus like the Dolphins did with Waddle. That allowed them to be able to pay Tua, and the same kind of thing with the Bengals. That could allow them maybe to pay T. Higgins, or maybe to get the combined production somewhere else to build up their offensive line, get a little more help on defense. Like, those kinds of things can happen if you just extend Chase now, keep him happy, pay the contract starting in 2026. You don't even have to pay him that much more than Justin Jefferson.
So you would pay him $35-36 million a year?
I would pay him 35 and a half, but just start it in 2026. It's not that hard to do. It's not T. Higgins who has to get paid because he's on a 50-year option. It wasn't what
I call his bluff. It
wasn't what Ayuk is doing now because he's playing on the 50-year option, same kind of thing. And CeeDee Lamb, all 3 of these guys were in that draft. Chase has 2 more years where he doesn't have to do it right now. Figure it out for 2026. Make him happy then. 4-year deal, a little above Jefferson. That's all he wants.
There's no question that, and Keith is right, the Bengals need Chase, but Chase is going to play this year. But what Chase is saying right now is he wants the contract now. You cannot go into the season where you're paying 2 players almost $100 million. You cannot do that, especially. And like you said, Speedy, you can move it to 2026. But
right.
Again, in 2026, the cap will go up a little bit, but then you're having a quarterback. If the quarterback has 2 really good seasons, three really good seasons, what's going to happen is Joe Burrow's going to tell him, I want to renegotiate my contract. I'm putting up the numbers that Patrick Mahomes is, and Patrick Mahomes is going to probably be making in 2 or 3 years $70-80 million. These quarterbacks, in one way or another, we're going to see in the next 10 to 12 years a quarterback that's going to make $100 million. We're going to see that, $1 billion contract. It's going to happen, and who's going to get that contract? Patrick Mahomes, unless Patrick Mahomes becomes Tom Brady and says, you know what, I'm going to think team first because I want to break Tom Brady's records. I want to win 8 Super Bowls. I want to win 9 or 10 Super Bowls and become the greatest quarterback to ever play the game. I think that if you sit here right now, Joe Burrow's the only quarterback when he plays Patrick Mahomes, you know that it's going to be a ball game. And you know that it's not going to be easy for Patrick, and it's not going to be easy for him to just completely shut down a guy like Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow has a winning record against Patrick Mahomes. How many quarterbacks right now in the NFL could say that? He's the only one. Yep. He is the only one that could say that he has his number. So, again, he does need Jamar Chase. There's no question that he does. But again, a healthy Joe Burrow puts the Bengals still in a good position where they could still be an elite team.
Yeah, I think Jamar Chase even too. Like he had one 150-yard game against the Chiefs. He had a 250-yard game against the Chiefs in the regular season, I think his rookie year. So like they need him badly, even just for that head-to-head held together. Because the Bengals, even last year with Jake Browning at quarterback, I think covered the spread against the Chiefs. So they clearly know that identity to make that kind of thing work, to be the real, like the Patriots to the Colts rivalry type thing when Brady and Peyton Manning were playing. Like they need to be that kind of team. And they know that factor in mind. And here's where it compares to the CeeDee Lamb contract with the Cowboys. Mike Brown and Jerry Jones are very similar, where they don't have GMs on their team. So they're really being their own de facto GM to make that kind of thing work. And if you break up the Burrow-Chase connection, the closest thing of a quarterback and a wide receiver, you're going to look really bad to have players.
They're not going to break that up. They're going to give him his contract. I just don't think they need to rush the contract. Let's bring Fish in. Let's get his opinion on this, because honestly, I think they need to sit for the season, wait it out, and see what Jamar Chase puts up when it comes to numbers, because Higgins could have a great season. What are you going to do then? What happens if Higgins has a better season than Jamar Chase? What happens if Higgins has somewhere close to Jamar Chase's season, and you have a guy like Higgins that has 1,200 yards and Jamar Chase that has, 1,400 yards? You could give Higgins the 25, 26 million, and you could say, you know what, Jamar? We're going to give Higgins his 25, 26 million. You're going to have to either sit, wait, or do what we ask you to do and sign the contract for 2026, 2027 and ride it out.
I don't know, man. I have to tell you straight up, I think Chase is just as, if not more talented than Justin Jefferson. And the way that he runs his routes, just take a look at how open Higgins is when they're playing. The double coverage had started after his rookie year. He's been facing it ever since the beginning. He's really great at stacking D-backs, as they say, and just getting open. He's really, really talented. He can do every. He's got the full route tree.
Nobody's saying that he's not.
Well, I'm saying Higgins doesn't have that same kind of route tree. Higgins is a different type of player.
Hold on. We don't know what Higgins is because he was a number 2. Actually, for 2 years, he was the number 3 player until he really jumped over Boyd. And now Boyd's no longer with them. Boyd's with Tennessee. And now he has a chance to be the straight up number 2 guy. I'm going to tell you this right now. Higgins, with a healthy Joe Burrow, is going to put up 1,200 yards this year. Higgins is going to put up probably between 8 to 9 touchdowns. And you're going to tell me if Jamar Chase, and I agree with you, Jamar Chase he's a great player. But if Jamar Chase only puts up 3 more touchdowns or 4 more touchdowns and only puts up 200 more yards, why would you overpay Jamar Chase when you could give Higgins the money and tell Jamar, you know what? Sit out for a half this season. Sit out. You're still a part of this organization. He doesn't want to go anywhere. Him and Joe Burrow are butt buddies. They're butt buddies. Why do you think that Jamar Chase became a Bengal? It wasn't just masterful thinking by the Bengals. Joe Burrow told them. Joe Burrow told them where they were drafting. I think they were drafting in the top 5.
Yep.
That's where, and they needed that offensive lineman. Mm-hmm. They needed Penei Sewell. That's what they needed. But you know what he did? The Bengals did what Joe Burrow wanted. Bring in Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase is going nowhere. It's all a ploy. And stop letting these players control your cap. Okay, they're going to get paid. He's going to get paid. Calm the hell down and figure out what you're doing with this team, because you did draft a wide receiver, in the 2nd or 3rd round this year, and that we don't know if that guy is going to be anywhere close to Higgins. And I still think they need Higgins just as much as they need Jamar Chase.
I love Higgins. I just don't think you can say him in the same sentence as Jamar Chase as far as
I didn't
talent.
say you put him in the same sentence, but if he could put somewhere close to the same numbers as Jamar Chase, you have to look at it. Do we pay Jamar Chase this offseason, or do we pay Higgins? Give Higgins the 24, 25 million that he wants and wait another year and then give Jamar Chase that extension. That's the way I look at it.
Look what they did this offseason. They went to the bargain barrel, got Zach Moss at running back. They're going to go with Chase Brown from Illinois. It was decent rookie year. So they're not spending there. The offensive line, they got the biggest offensive lineman they could find. They have 3 guys that are around like 6'6" and bigger. I think actually over 6'7", and like close and well over 350. Like 3 guys on their line are like that. So they're obviously just trying to get guys that you can't get by, that you can't get in front of. You know, hopefully the guys on the outside can handle up the speed rush, but they're definitely going to try to protect Burrow. Now, you said that they shouldn't have gone for Chase that year. Think about it. He blew out his ACL that year, and they still went receiver instead of offensive line. Well, now they have the offensive line. They don't have the running back.
It was a big mistake.
I think it was.
I think it was a big mistake because if they had Penei Sewell, maybe they win that Super Bowl. Maybe they win that Super Bowl. Because why? Aaron Donald caused a huge, huge problem. Now, everybody's going to say, well, Jamar Chase was a big reason why they went to the Super Bowl. Hold on one second. If you look at the numbers in the playoffs, it was all Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow was stepping into the passes. Mixon was running the ball very well in that playoff run. He was. And they got to the Super Bowl. If they had Penei Sewell, maybe they beat the LA Rams in that Super Bowl. Maybe they have one Super Bowl under their, what do they say? On their finger. How's that? A ring. I have a trophy over there, a Lombardi trophy. So
I just know as a defensive coach, though, Errol, as a defensive coach, you're saying, who do we have to stop to prevent us from beating us? And that guy is Jamar Chase on this team. Make them beat you with Higgins. You can't let Chase beat you because he's so good. You got to bring all the attention. So now they tilt the field that way. And everybody knows, look back at old Randy Moss films, right? They tilted the field to Randy Moss, and other guys were able to get wide open. And when the Patriots had Moss going deep and Welker underneath, and, Edelman coming into his own on the other side underneath, that was completely unstoppable as one of the greatest teams of all time. Chase has even better route tree than Moss. Obviously not the same as Moss going deep, but nobody's ever going to be like that, arguably. He's still pretty dang good at it. And he can do all those things in the same way that it tilts the field, the same way Calvin Johnson tilted the field. He's that kind of a talent. T. Higgins, he still can carry a team, but not in the same way. If you had a better run game, if they spent on the run game and then had some play action, Higgins would be great in that. Because
I didn't say that Higgins is Jamar Chase. I'm just saying if you can see if Higgins has a good year this coming year, and he shows up because he didn't look good last year, and that was because Joe Burrow was hurt. If Browning was the quarterback, and Browning didn't play bad, but he wasn't Joe Burrow. If Joe Burrow comes into the season, he's strong. He looks good. I'm just saying. And T. Higgins has 1,200 yards and puts up 8 to 9 touchdowns. I think you look into the offseason, you say, you know what? Jamar Chase still has another year left. I give T. Higgins the contract, give him the $25 million, because to me, that's a deal for a second string wide receiver. I mean, a second tier wide receiver, and he might be the best second tier wide receiver in the NFL. T. Higgins could be the best second tier wide receiver in all of the NFL. So if you pay him that $25 million, then you can wait a year or franchise him the year after, give him the $30 million, because that, in 2 years from now, that franchise tag could probably be just as much as what they would probably paying him for yearly, probably between 30 and 35 million. So he'll be happy with that. I know he wants an extension. I know he wants a long-term deal. I just think that the Bengals need to be smart here. You just pay Joe Burrow. Your team, if you pay 2 players almost $100 million, you're going to set your team back. You're in the driver's seat right now. You're one of the best teams in the AFC, and you're probably the only team right now on paper, because of Joe Burrow, that could beat Kansas City in Kansas City or even in Cincinnati.
Yeah, it's interesting because the approach for the Bengals has changed a lot since they drafted Burrow. They were signing a lot more free agents on defense, and now a lot of those contracts have become bargains as a result of that. And now they're able to leeway that money to be able to do it with Burrow and eventually deal with Chase if they're smart with doing with it.
And what are they going to do? Speedy, what are they going to do? Here's the problem. What are they going to do if Joe Burrow puts up an MVP season this year, throws close to 5,000 yards with Jamar Chase and Higgins and those kind of numbers, and they're a Super Bowl contender? 2 years from now, you know what Joe Burrow's going to say? I want more money. I want more.
And Fish, you brought up a good point, too, with the way that they've kind of done it with more quantity on the offensive line as well. Orlando Brown got the big contract, but a lot of that was in the signing bonus. And now they're taking a chance on Trent Brown, who was good in New England, but was bad with the Raiders. Which end of it you're going to get with him? But a lot of these other contracts now on the defensive side have become bargains to be able to make that kind of thing work. And like you were saying with the running backs, will it work with Zach Moss and Chase Brown? I don't know. But a lot of that is going to have to do with the offensive line.
How are you betting on Moss? He had a good season last year as a running back. He's a good running back. He's not a great running back. And we'll see when he plays on it. Now, he was the number one running back all season long until Taylor came back with Indianapolis. He's not going to be the number one running back on this team. He's not the number one guy. There's going to be three guys running the ball. So it's different. Look at Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon is a great running back. Now he's going to the Texans. He is going to be touching the ball a lot more than he did with Cincinnati because they're going to ride Joe Mixon. Last year, for the last 2 years, 3 years, they didn't ride Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon was touching the ball 5 times a game, and they were splitting time with Joe Mixon and a bunch of running backs. It's not the same. And I'm going to tell you this right now. If everybody's going to bet on Moss and all the guys that they bring in, the guys that you're going to watch this year, the 2 guys that you need to watch is Higgins and Chase. Those are the guys, if they're healthy with Joe Burrow, are going to put up big, huge numbers. And I'm going to tell you this right now. I'm giving Higgins the money, not Jamar Chase. Not that I'm not going to pay Jamar Chase. I'd sit back and challenge Jamar Chase. You know what? Do you want to win Super Bowls? Do you want to win championships? Or you just care about your pockets? You're still 22 years old. You have a tremendous amount of time to make the money that you're going to make. Just give it a little bit more. Give it another year, and we're going to pay you.
Yeah, and that's the mold of that is what you're seeing with a lot of these teams too, being able to extend the contracts and get more guaranteed money later. And I think they have to factor that in when giving the percentages of this contract out. You might have to take a little bit less or wait a little longer, but give the percentages that'll still work for him where most of it's guaranteed money, or like I said, push it to the 2026 season like the Dolphins did. And that kind of thing can work if you're doing it well to be able to make everybody happy. And Mike Brown, who's very stubborn, is going to have to realize that. Now, I think he's evolved in recent years. I think he's not as stubborn as he used to be when
he's done this year.
Not pay anybody.
He's done this year. If this team does not get to the AFC Championship, Mike Brown is going to be fired.
Well, he's the owner of the team.
I'm not Mike Brown. I'm sorry. Zach Taylor.
Zach Taylor, yeah.
Zach Taylor.
Well, I have my doubts with, too. Yeah.
Zach Taylor will be fired at the end of the season. That's what I meant. Zach Taylor will be fired at the end of the season if this team doesn't make the AFC title game.
Oh, yeah.
They're on paper, everybody has the Bengals winning that division still over Baltimore. Yep. There's so many people that have them winning because of Joe Burrow. If they don't, and I don't think they need to win the division. I think they need to go to the AFC title game and play Kansas City. If they don't do that, if the Jets beat them, if the Jets make the playoffs, or if Baltimore beats them, or any one of these other teams beat them, Zach Taylor is going to be fired. And that's why there's a lot of pressure on him to make sure that Higgins has a good season and Jamar Chase has a good season. And his offensive line holds up because last year, that offensive line was dead. The Jets and the Bengals had more injuries on their offensive line last year than any team in football. Okay. And why do you think Joe Burrow got hurt last year? And it was a freak accident. His finger on somebody's helmet. Yeah. And why? Because they couldn't protect him.
Fisher, you were saying something?
Yeah, so I always like to think about the economics of it as an economics teacher. And you both touched on it. And it's for Chase, it makes sense to not ask for the money this year because we know that the NFL is signing all these streaming rights deals. We know the cap is going to go up a lot, and we know there's going to be more room for Chase to make a lot more money if he does it next year than this year. Contrarily, what is Mike Brown doing? Get this guy now before you have to pay him a lot more. It doesn't really make a ton of sense for future goals, not paying a guy when his number is going to be a lot lower.
The CBA is going up. The CBA is going to go up another year. So pay him another year. I pay Higgins at the end of the year. I'm doing that. I'm telling you right now, mark my words. Anybody's playing fantasy, draft Higgins. I'm telling you right now, mark my words. Take it, buy it, whatever. So I told my friend, Pick up T. Higgins because he's going to fall to the 4th or 5th round. Pick up T. Higgins. He's going to be beasting this year. I expect him to put up between 1,200 and 1,300 yards as the second wide receiver on the Bengals. If Joe Burrow stays healthy, mark my words, 8 to 9 touchdowns, 12 to 1,300 yards. Book it.